All right. I am so excited to have Gary Salman here from Black Talon Security with us. And this is, I know, just going to be such a great podcast. There are so many questions, Gary, I have for you. And I know that the listeners out there are going to have as well. Of course, security and cybersecurity is such a hot topic right now. And so before we jump into the many questions that I have for you, I want you to just tell us a little bit about yourself. I know I just did a really nice introduction, but I always love to hear from my guests. Tell us a little bit about you and Black Talon.
Sure. So I've actually been in the dental technology space for almost 30 years, way too long, but I love it. That's where I grew up, right? I grew up in a dental family. My dad's a recently retired oral surgeon. So I grew up with all the gory photographs, from like age 5, the video trauma back then. But so I actually started my career back in college. In the OMS space, my dad came to me and it was like, hey, I need software for my office and I can't find anything specific for oral surgeons. Everything's for like general dentists. So long story short, he kind of sketched out what the software was supposed to look like. And I've taught myself to code. And I had this vision of being, an oral surgeon. And I was in pre-med in college and I ended up switching my major to business and computers and just started developing a flourishing business from the dorm room of my college. And by the time I graduated college, I had like 30 clients that I was supporting from my dorm room. I didn't even have a cell phone back then. It was on a pager.
Wow.
I'm dating myself now, right? But that was kind of my start in the IT space. I eventually not only developed software, I owned an IT company. So we did the computers and the software. And in the late 90s, I built one of the very first cloud technologies anywhere in the healthcare space.
Wow.
On the ground floor there. And by 2002, I had about 2,500 users we were supporting on this cloud technology. It wasn't even called cloud back then. It was, server-based computing. So, I've had a lot of experience in the dental space. And then, I worked for a company that was big into dental imaging and practice management software. I even ran the orthodontic division for a couple of years. Yeah, I mean, that's my background. I also have 18 years of law enforcement experience on top of that. So kind of if you think about what we do, like it's very technical, but we're dealing with criminals all the time. So I think, having the experience from the law enforcement perspective and then having, the coding experience, I've written 1 million plus lines of code and built lots of technology. So blending kind of those two skill sets is, I think, really helped us be successful. And right now we secure about 26,000 computers in the dental space.
Wow.
40 of those in ortho and oral surgery. So.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I love hearing, the progression and, who would have thought, I'm sure being an oral surgeon would have been very successful too. But I mean, to look at where we're at with just everything is on computers now. There isn't an office that I don't start that doesn't have a computer in it, of course. And, I think that looking at the security that goes along in keeping us safe in our offices and knowing that you've developed a company that has been able to move with our industry is just a really cool thing. So with that, I just want to jump in and there may be some people out there that just really don't have a good understanding of what cybersecurity is all about. And is it really applicable to me? I mean, can people really get in there? So would you mind just starting us off with maybe some of the misconceptions out there that you probably run into, from doctors to team members? And I'm going to give you kind of a 2-part question here. So I want to talk about that a little bit, but also some of those misconceptions between, I don't have anything to worry about because I've got a cloud-based software versus I've got a server in my office. So I know that that's a big ask, but I want you to unpack that for us a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, look, I get a lot of questions. I think the typical one is, how is a hacker from Russia going to find my practice in Atlanta?
Yes.
right?
Right. I'm just a little,
Right.
practice in the middle of, wherever.
Yeah, in the middle of Iowa, wherever, right? So I think the reality is it doesn't really go down that way. I don't have any intelligence, right, or any previous experiences where a hacker said they've Googled conceptually the name of a practice in a town and then figured out how to attack them. I think most of the practices that are getting hit are what I'll say by accident, right? Their networks are not configured properly. Their firewall's not configured properly. They're connected to a third party and that third party gets hit, and then they become a victim. So basically the way to think about this is the hackers can scan tens of millions IP addresses every few hours, and they're going to come across the practice's firewall. If you pull the log files out of ortho practice's firewall, some of these ortho practices are getting hit hundreds and hundreds of times per day, minimum.
That's nuts.
It's crazy, right?
Nuts.
So it's literally like visualize someone coming by, like 1,000 criminals coming by your house every day and kicking on your front door. Eventually the door is going to fly open, right? So that's typically how it happens. It can also happen through email, right? Where hackers can get access to lots of different email accounts, maybe in a specific industry. They know healthcare is probably one of the top targets. Why?
Sure.
Because the doctors have to pay when they get hit with ransom because they don't want their kids' photographs and records published.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And the hackers talk on dark web channels and have these discussions. Oh, we're hitting healthcare. The doctors always pay. Most of them have insurance. Most of them have at least $100,000. And they're like, whoa, where do I get a list of email addresses of orthodontists? Well, every day I get an email in my inbox. Would you like to buy a list of every orthodontist in the country? I'm sure you get that too.
That is the truth. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I'm like, spam. Yeah,
I do it all too. And every day it's a new Gmail account that they create to try and get us to buy a list of every orthodontist. So look, the data's out there, right? And that's the unfortunate thing. So one could say it's not a direct target in most cases, but you get hit by fire, unfortunately, because they'll broadcast out an email to maybe 50,000 dentists. And you just happen to be on that list. You happen to be the receiver of one of these malicious emails and you're caught off guard and you click and your system gets hit, right? So about 60% of the clients that, or the victims that contact us, they are impacted through an email, right? And an employee, a team member clicked on something. A lot of times it's the doctor themselves that caused the attack against their own practice because they're not trained. So you had asked a very important question, and I think this is a big misperception in this space, which is I have cloud and I have nothing to worry about. So first of all,
and I hear it, I just have to say, I hear it over and over and over again. And I can't wait for you to talk about this.
Yeah. So you heard me say I'm a big proponent. I do believe in cloud technology. I think it's wonderful. So a lot of times when doctors say, oh, I'm in cloud, I don't have to worry about it. The company that has my data, that's their problem. So let's understand both the technical and the legal aspects of this. So the way the HIPAA laws, and I know a lot of orthodontists are like, oh, I don't care about HIPAA. It doesn't even apply to me. I'm not even sure. I'm like, all right, well, it's not quite true, but it probably does. Just like OSHA, right? I just did a lecture and I said, how many people know cybersecurity awareness training is required under federal law? Right? It's like 60 something people in the room. One person raised their hand. I'm like, how many people know you have to do OSHA training? And everyone raises their hand, right? So I think there's some big misunderstandings around HIPAA and who's responsible for data, but conceptually, you're responsible for your data regardless of where it's being stored or housed or accessed. So if the provider that has your practice management software gets hit under the federal laws, technically that's still your breach. You, the orthodontist, still own that breach.
Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting.
Right now, there may be legal agreements in place and that cloud provider may step up and pay for everything financially and their insurance may cover it. But in the end, it still gets tagged to your practice, right? If those patient records were still part of the breach, that breach is still reported under your practice. And it's all public data now. You can go to a website that the Office for Civil Rights, which is part of Health and Human Services, posts. It's literally called the Wall of Shame. And you will see all the medical groups and all the dental groups that have had breaches. So all it takes is a little Google search, Smile Ortho of Atlanta. And in a Google search, it'll show the Office for Civil Rights and the name of the practice. And someone will be like, oh, they had a breach. I may not want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, I'm sure talk a lot about reputation and the importance of that.
Yeah.
Now we have a technical issue to deal with as well, reputation. So technical reputation is what I was trying to say. There's that. So let's talk about really what the cloud is and some different methodologies that could result in a breach. Mm-hmm. So there are medical systems and there's some cloud technology in the dental space, without picking on companies, that actually have been hit by ransomware, right? Some very big names in the dental space and medical space that have been victimized by ransomware. And people will be like, how's that possible? Like, everyone says their data is with Microsoft or Amazon Web Services. Like, these are multi-billion-dollar companies. They can't secure this. But what a lot of folks don't realize is what those companies are providing these companies with is a place to put the practice management software. So you're basically buying space in a data center on servers to run your software. They're not really responsible for the security. Then there's the application itself. If the application that stores all of your practice management data is not being properly tested and security measures aren't in place, then that's how the hackers can break in and deploy their ransomware. The other way they can get in and damage the system is through the computers in the practice. I've seen this a couple of times now, both in the dental space and outside of the dental space. And specifically, we just saw one in the ortho space where practices computers were breached by the hackers. So what did the hackers do? They installed screen sharing software on all of the computers in this ortho practice. And then what they do is, after hours, typically around midnight, they will remote in, just like you may remote into some of your clients if you do that, or the doctors remote into their practice management software at the office, which is a very common thing. Yeah. And they remoted into these machines and they opened up Google Chrome. And you know what they did? They looked at the browsing history and they saw all the websites that the person was accessing. And one of them was the practice management software. So this is where it gets really ugly. So they clicked on the link to the practice management software. And then the practice management software loaded on their screen. And then Google Chrome inserted the username and password. Why?
Oh, no,
the employee saved it.
Yes. And how many of us, I just have to say this, like, for everyone out there listening, how many of us do this? Like, it's just, we're so used to just having things save but we wouldn't even think about this. Gosh, what an eye-opening thing to think about, how easy somebody could, because you say, oh, but we're locked. We're fine. We've got a password for our software. We've got a password for this, for that. But if you've got autofill on there, not so good.
Yeah. And then even look at this. And I know Amazon is not the same as accessing your patient data, but here's a prime example. You log into Amazon today. Let's just say it's from a brand new computer. What does Amazon do? It prompts you to enter your username, your password, and maybe it even sends a code to your cell phone. Great. Mm-hmm. Once you punch all that in, Amazon's like, I trust the computer.
Oh.
So what happens tomorrow when you log into Amazon? Does it prompt you for your username and password? Nope. It puts a token on your machine saying, I trust Jill's computer. So when these hackers are accessing these devices, these computers, this is what they're doing. They know how, to breach these systems. They know once they get into the systems, the things they need to look for. We've had ortho practices where the hackers get in, they type in Amazon.com, Amazon opens right up, they order gift cards, $500,000, $1,000 gift cards. Sometimes Amazon catches them in time and sometimes they don't. So I get it. That's way different than a ransomware attack. But let me give you another example, the practice's bank account. What happens if the doctor saved her username and password? They see chase.com, they pick chase.com, it inserts username and password. They see $100,000 in the bank account, pick the wire transfer option and wire $100,000 out to them. I'm dealing with this exact scenario right now for an OMS practice, $250,000 fraud, right? They hacked the doctor's computer. They executed a $250,000 wire transfer to a foreign country. They did it on a Friday night. The doctor didn't know about it until... they're not catching it over Friday afternoon before the wires closed, not Friday night, I misspoke. And then the doctor didn't log into his account until Tuesday and the money's gone, right? So now he's dealing with insurance companies. He only had $100,000 worth of insurance. The bank saying it's your fault. You didn't secure the computer. They don't want to pay, the $250,000 back. Look, it's a train wreck. That's a lot of money, So one of the things that I always share with folks is you have to think about things differently. It's not so straightforward. It's not like, oh, they're just going to breach the cloud provider and hit me. There's lots of different ways they can do this. An employee could get phished, right? It looks like it's an email that the email looks like it's coming from a cloud provider telling you to reset your password. And Stacy at the front desk punches in her username and password and just sent it over to the hacker, right? So this is why we have to be smart about the things we do. And then the other issue with saying, hey, the risk is now with the cloud provider is this. When machines get hit with ransomware, right? Maybe your practice management data is perfectly safe. That's good. We'll take that. Well, any win we can take, we'll take.
Yep.
But when your machines are compromised, you can't use them. Because if you have a machine with ransomware on it, it's considered compromised. The hackers have access to it. They probably have screen sharing software watching what you're doing. So how do you function as an ortho practice when none of your computers work? Especially if you're slightly bigger. Like if you have, 15, 20 computers in a single location and every machine is hit.
Compromise. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. No pans, no Cephs, no cone beam, no intraoral scans, right? Accessing your cloud technology, you can't do anything. And a lot of folks don't think about that. And then when I say that, are you going to shut your doors for 5 to 7 days, to get all your machines cleaned and your network rebuilt? And what happens if they did gain access to your data? What are you going to do now?
Right. Wow. These are things you just don't even think about. And even, like it's hard enough in our offices when we have a sterilization unit, something go down or this or that. I mean, think about all of your computers. And even if you're like, oh, well, we'll just go buy a couple others until they get fixed. I mean, that isn't easy either. There's just no easy solution there.
Yeah. Think about supply chain right now. It's difficult to get computers still,
Yeah.
And they're, maybe you go to Best Buy and get lucky, but buy 15 new computers or struggle for a week. So for most practices, if they're not on cloud technology, they're just going to shut their doors for 2 weeks. That's it. They're done, right? Nothing works. The systems are smoked. If they are on cloud, they might be able to limp along with a couple computers. But here's the struggle for most ortho practices that have cone beam. If that acquisition machine gets hit, what often has to happen? The cone beam manufacturer often has to come in, reconfigure it, recalibrate the machine. Now you're at the mercy of when they have availability or their local, service provider, their availability. So there's a lot more to this. And then just think about like how much revenue is being lost and then just pissed off patients, right? And that's what we see a lot of times is we think about this as being a strictly financial issue, right?
Yeah.
The hackers hit me. My practice is down. I need to pay them $100,000 so they don't publish all these kids' photographs. But you don't think about the team stress. I will tell you that I've been on the ground for many of these ransomware cases, and you can see the fear in the team's faces because they know, hey, did I do this?
Right.
And they question everything, right? They often don't know who we are, right? When we come in, because it's kind of kept quiet. And then they'll get to the point where they'll pull one of us aside. They'll be like, so I think we have ransomware and, did I do this? Does the doctor think this is my fault? Is this practice going to go out of business? Are we going to be on TV, right? On the news? And it's very stressful. And then the doctors are looking at it as, am I going to survive this event? From a financial perspective, there have been practices that have literally closed their doors permanently because they couldn't afford the event.
Wow.
It's heartbreaking.
So let's talk a little bit about how can teams and doctors be a good frontline defense? Like, can you give us some tips for? I mean, you just kind of exposed a lot of things that I don't think any of us have thought about. When you think about how can attacks happen, but give us some tips on how team members or doctors can be a little more proactive with situations like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, a lot of things we talked about, it's tough to stomach. I get it, right? It's not something you want to hear or talk about, but we have to, right?
Yes, for sure.
For sure. So the good news is, just like you were alluding to, most of the stuff's preventable, right? When we look at through digital forensics investigations, kind of like analyzing the crime scene, we're looking at it like, wow, this was 99% of the time, this was totally preventable. If the doctor in practice had done this, this could have been stopped. So one of the biggest wins from a preventative standpoint is training and education. So like I alluded to at the beginning, under federal law, you have to train your staff on cybersecurity threats. There has to be a formalized program that's documented that brings your entire team and doctors are not excluded from this, through a training program that helps empower them, right? It teaches them, hey, this is a phishing email. This is a spear phishing email. Mm-hmm. This is some type of social engineering scam, right? This is a text message scam. So what I say is that a well-trained human, right? That's in our world, that's what we call them. A well-trained human, in our world, we'll call them team member, right? A well-trained team member is better at detecting these types of attacks than any piece of software or hardware out there. Okay, because they have the ability to be analytical when the software is kind of like yes or no, ones and zeros. So by training and empowering your team to look at an email and say, all right, this sounds weird, like this OMS down the street normally wouldn't say something like this to me. This isn't an attachment that I would normally see. The doctor wouldn't ask me to go out and get gift cards or reset my password. By training them and empowering them, they can then make a decision. I'm not doing this. This is what I just learned about. Very, very effective. Okay.
That's great.
Yeah. And it has to be ongoing. And you know what we've found, and so many people tell us, the doctors, the team members, the administrators are all say, you know what, we all worry about this. We never did anything about it. And it was stressful. But now that we have been empowered to kind of make our own decisions because we have the knowledge on how to do that, it's like the sense of relief.
Yeah.
You know what a lot of the orthos do is they'll have a lunch party, bring some pizza and be like, hey guys, so I was just at the AAO and I listened to the cybersecurity guy and, he said not to click on stuff. So don't click on anything. It doesn't work, right? You can't run an ortho practice without clicking on stuff. Patients send you the referrals, the GPs, the surgeons, they are sending stuff constantly, as you well know. You have to click on stuff. So instead of saying that, let's maybe teach people how to do it intelligently, right? Without exposing the practice. So training is very, very powerful.
Great. And so I know I'm on the edge of my seat. I know somebody else is too. Where do you find this training? Because, it's easy to find OSHA training. It's easy to find HIPAA training. It's easy to find, but I mean, I'm a consultant. I've been doing this for a long time and I don't know how easy it is out there. So do you guys do that? Do you have sites that you think we should be going to? I mean, I want to unpack this just a little bit more because I know that somebody's like, Jill, get the answer for me.
Tell me. Stop the talking and tell me how to fix it, right? So to answer your question, companies like ours have training platforms designed to specifically educate folks like an ortho practice on these various types of cyber threats. So we've built a platform that is designed specifically for the dental industry. And what it does is it gives them real world scenarios. You receive an email from the general dentist down the street. This is the type of attachment. This is how you look at the attachment, determine whether it's malicious or it's not, right? And it gives them kind of a process to follow so they can make their own decisions. It documents their progress through the training. And at the end, they actually get a HIPAA certificate indicating that they've completed this component of HIPAA compliance.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And, for any of my docs or team members that are listening, I want you to take this note. You guys are always looking for things to do in your team meetings, right? Like, why not dedicate one of your team meetings once a year to getting this training? We've just heard it's mandated already, but get it on the docket, get in with a company that's going to be able to help you make sure that we're doing this. Because the other thing is, unfortunately, we've got continual team turnover. And I think that, thinking that by telephone, the right message is going to be passed along from employee to new employee to past employee, it's just not going to happen. So we need to dedicate training to this because this is not going away. I mean, we're already in an industry where we're moving farther and farther and farther away from paper and more and more and more into computers. And we have to, safeguard ourselves. It's like, in the olden days now, I've been doing this for over 30 years, where, it used to be required that we lock our file cabinets at the end of every night. Well, this is the same concept. We have to lock down our cloud, our files virtually, so that we don't run into issues. Sorry, I'm fired up about this, because this is I know this is what people want to hear. I got another question for you, because I get asked this a lot. So let's talk a little bit about antivirus systems. Now, Gary, I mean, are you telling us that if we have an antivirus system, that's not going to save us? I get asked, do we really need this? Do we really need things to be followed up with? I mean, right. We're a smaller practice, or we're a larger practice, but we're pretty self-contained. Can you talk a little bit? Are antiviruses still relevant? Is it going to help us or not? Because to me, it sounds like this is a little bit different than just your run-of-the-mill, an antivirus will save you.
Yeah. Look, so I think it's a great question. Let's start out by understanding kind of the generations of antivirus.
Yes.
So the antivirus that probably 90% of ortho practices have, believe it or not, is known as generation 1. This technology has been around probably as long as you've been consulting. I'm
sure.
Me too, right? So right there with you. We're probably crossing paths at a young age.
Exactly.
Not knowing one another. So the traditional antivirus software that's been around for about 30 years works like this. It has a dictionary of known threats that the vendors have put into this dictionary. So typical ones are like malware bites, Bitdefender, Northern Internet Security, things like that. Mm-hmm. So what happens is these companies find these pieces of malicious code, usually after they've been used to hit someone. And then they take it, they analyze it, they put it in their dictionary, and then they send it out to these tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users, and it updates the dictionary. But here's the problem. There's a long span of time between that. So what the hackers are now doing is they'll go out and buy all these antivirus software applications. You name it.
Because they're smart.
They're smart. And for $5, who cares? Because they'll make $100,000 on a $5 investment. So they'll engineer their code, their malicious code, to the point where the antivirus software cannot detect it. Once it goes undetectable by a majority of the platforms, they will unleash it to hundreds of thousands of people. Then people get hit with the malicious code, ransomware, et cetera. And then finally, these antivirus companies get a copy of the code, they analyze it, they update their dictionaries. Now they have to push the updates to all of these clients. But from the moment that the hackers first release it until these antivirus companies detect it and deal with it, could be days to weeks. So all these systems go basically undetected, or unprotected, I should say, because the dictionary hasn't been updated. Very simple, okay? Old school technology. So then a couple of years ago, companies came out and said, hey, there's kind of this cool thing now called artificial intelligence, AI. Maybe we can use AI to analyze some code and try and determine through, computers' intelligence, is this malicious? Does it look like hackers, creating this type of code or not? Mm-hmm. So this becomes the second generation of antivirus. So it kind of combines a dictionary of stuff, but it also uses its, intelligence. So basically what happens now is a doctor opens an attachment. There's a link. He or she clicks on it. It is malicious. This AI will intercept the code, send it to a supercomputer, analyze it really fast in the blink of an eye, and send a message back to the computer saying, I think it's safe or it's malicious, kill it. Okay, not bad. But the AI on Gen 2 was kind of limited and rudimentary, just like any type of evolution. Mm-hmm. And the AI could only look at one machine at a time. It didn't really have the ability to understand what was going on across the entire practice, like on every computer.
Sure.
Gen 3 comes out, which is what we recommend. Gen 3 is known as Extended Detection and Response. XDR is the acronym. The previous generation was EDR, Endpoint Detection and Response. Okay. What the XDR does now is it's much more advanced AI, artificial intelligence. It has the ability to look at behaviors. So maybe a couple of tools that someone like myself or my company may use to do things on your network, those tools individually are okay. But when hackers take those tools and combine them into a toolkit to try and exploit networks, the AI can say, whoa, hold on a second. This looks like the fingerprint of a hacking event. and it can instantly shut the machine off, shut the machine down and take it off the network. So, right. So it's thinking on its own. Mm-hmm. It can also say, I've been watching what Jill has been doing for the last couple of weeks, and I've never seen her, go from her computer to Stacy's computer, then Stacy's computer to the server. And all of a sudden this event's happening. The AI is processing all this data in fractions of a second. And it's like, stop, we have a problem here. Someone is trying to get through the network on Jill's machine, and it will literally sever the connections to these three machines. So through this behavior analysis, the analysis of this code, it can autonomously literally fight back against the hackers without a human intervening. Now, it also has the ability of stopping some forms of ransomware, and also understand that there's no technology in existence, regardless of the price tag, that stops everything, right? Mm-hmm. So the real benefit here is if someone does get into your network or malicious code tries to come into your network, you kind of have a fighting chance now with this XDR. The best way I can describe it is, and we'll talk about another technology in a minute as well, the best way I can describe it is if you put a lot of really good locks on your doors and windows at your house, and for some reason those doors and locks fail, your last line of defense is that German Shepherd, right?
Yeah.
So someone, that battering ram hits the back door of your house, gets into your house, and all of a sudden, right, the German Shepherd comes, and the guy's like, I'm out of here, right? Conceptually, that's what this AI technology is now doing. It's literally like, hey, this is your last chance to, prevent someone from doing something, malicious to your network.
Wow. What a great explanation. And kind of scary. Like you said, it's kind of hard to stomach this. Now, here's what's coming to my mind. But I've got a Mac.
Yes.
but I've got a Mac computer, and I love my Mac, and I know I'm safe with my Mac. Am I safe with my Mac?
So, good question. I'll give you my answer from like 5 weeks ago, and I'm going to give you my answer today.
Okay.
So ransomware, viruses, things like that are definitely not as prevalent in the Mac ecosystem. Okay. Mm-hmm. Macs by default, right, by nature, really, are engineered to be more secure. No one in the security world is going to argue with you on that. However, I think your statement is very applicable because a lot of IT folks tell their clients, oh, you're on a Mac, nothing's going to happen. You don't even need antivirus for a Mac computer. That's a waste of money. Okay, so let's look back about 4 weeks ago. What happened? Apple came out and publicly said almost every iPad, iPhone, and Mac computer is susceptible to a complete takeover by hackers. It literally
do an update.
Exactly. Update now, right? And it set the entire security world on fire. Like everyone's like racing around like, holy crap, right? This wasn't supposed to ever happen. And here we are. But here's kind of a problem right now. There are plenty of practices that have Mac devices that can't accept the new security update.
Interesting.
And they're like kind of hanging out there naked, right? In the cyber world. So hopefully they have an IT company that advised them properly, like, hey, you got to buy this new computer. Or unfortunately, maybe the practice doesn't understand the risk that they have. But yes, look, Mac computers by default are typically more secure. But I also tell you the hacking community knows that more and more Macs are out there, and they're starting to target them. It's cat and mouse game, right? I mean, it's epitome of what just happened a couple of weeks ago. Hackers found an in. Apple's fighting back by trying to fix their code really quickly. And now they have a problem. How do we update tens of millions of devices literally almost overnight? Wow. But yes, like I agree. And in ortho, there's a very, I wouldn't say very high, but a higher adoption rate of Mac versus all the other dental specialties.
Yeah. So this kind of takes me to my next question in, especially, advising doctors as startups. And, I work with a lot of startups existing, just kind of all areas and ages in the life cycle in a practice. But we're hearing more and more about having cyber insurance. And Jill, should I have cyber insurance? Should I not? Is that just part of my, my just general policy in the practice?
Right.
Would you mind talking a little bit about that and so just some things that we need to be thinking about? Because I would say there was probably first gen cyber insurance and,
Analogy,
and
yes.
yeah.
And it was like $200. Like everyone had it, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And you're going to be fine. But I do feel like as practices, we really have to think about this. And I know we had talked in the past about a lot of times, even the ransomware and the ransom payments, they aren't even being asked in cash. They're being asked in Bitcoin and different things. And I know I'm kind of talking about two different thought processes, but I do think they somewhat go together. So do you mind talking about that a little bit as we, kind of come to the end here? And I just think that's a real good thing that I think a lot of people are going to want to know about as well.
Yeah, look, I'm super familiar with this, right? Because one of the things that our company does is we get calls from ortho practices that said, hey, I got hit with ransomware. I need your help, right? And we deal with them. We're dealing with the cyber criminals, the hackers all the time, and we're paying them in Bitcoin, like you said. So what's going on in the insurance world right now related to cyber? So first, practices should understand this core concept. Your malpractice and your general business liability insurance is most likely not going to cover anything from a cyber perspective. And then a lot of doctors are like, I'll just file under business interruption. Well, read your policy. The interruption will not often cover a cyber event. You need a separate policy for that. So a lot of doctors are shocked. They had $100,000 worth of business losses. They can't claim a penny on $1 million policy. The next thing is you need to look. Well, let me backtrack. Every practice should have cyber coverage, period. I don't care if you're in the cloud, if you're on Mac, you're on Windows. It's not always a cyber event. It could be an employee, right? We've had practices. I'm dealing with an event right now. Practice administrator downloaded the entire patient database and quit, right? So it's a massive advantage,
my goodness.
Right? You just can't make this stuff up. No. We had another practice that, went and opened a tattoo parlor and took the entire ortho database and started emailing all of these people. And some people started connecting the dots. So we have to, like I said earlier, we have to think differently about events. We can't always just say, oh, it's a hacker. Okay.
Yep.
So with that being said, everyone should have insurance. You should talk to your agent about how much coverage you need. I will tell you that for most events, and it is very variable depending on the number of patients in the system, your revenue on an annual basis. But we tell most practices you really need like $500,000 worth of coverage minimum. If you are multi-office,
that's so good to know.
Yeah, multi-office, multi-doctor, it could be in the millions. You need to carefully look at that policy. We did an ortho practice up in New England that got breached, and they had $1 million policy, but almost all of the money was going towards fines, legal fees, patient notification. Very little, only $50,000 went to the ransomware payment, and the ransom demand was $100,000. They had to come out of pocket for $50,000 just on the ransom payment. So the policy might be cheaper, but it's just like any insurance policy. You got to understand what you're buying here. If you have a good insurance agent, right, you should sit down with them and really understand, hey, how much will you pay to the ransom? How much will you pay to a cyber company to help me recover? If I, have to notify my patients or I have fines from the government, how much is covered there? The next thing you should know is
questions.
Yeah, all really important things to understand. That $100,000 policy may be better than $1 million policy, depending on the coverage, right? So it's not always as it appears to be. The next thing you should know, it's becoming more and more difficult to get cyber coverage. We didn't get into a lot of the details in terms of what you need from a protection standpoint, but this XDR software that you and I just discussed, this AI technology, they're asking you, do you have this on your network? If you answer no, most likely you will not get cyber coverage anymore. All right. The insurance carriers know how effective it is. They are getting so detailed that they will give you one or two brand names of this XDR software. And if you don't have either of those two because your IT company sold you something different, they'll be like, nope, no coverage. We don't care. Like, it's not worth us losing $500,000 for a $3,000 policy. They'll walk away from the application. So the applications, you kind of made the joke a couple of years ago, it was simple to get. It was easy. Sure. You filled out a one-page app. You answered the questions however you wanted to. Who cares? Send it in. The agent would even be like, just fill out a who cares? They give everyone insurance, right?
Yes.
You'll get coverage.
Yes.
All right. You could lie on it. Not saying you should, but you could lie and no one's checking. It doesn't work that way anymore. They will literally conduct tests on your network. They will look at your website. They will do dark web searches. They will test your technology to see if you're telling the truth on these applications, because these carriers have been paying out billions of dollars. They're not doing it anymore. Wow. The application went from a one pager to, for most ortho practices, somewhere between 10 and 13 pages. They will even ask you who has access to your network. Does an IT company have access? Does, a billing person have access? All these different things, because they know, hey, if that IT company gets hit with ransomware, that ransomware can spread into the practice, right? So they're asking these types of very detailed questions. And what we're starting to see is a lot of people are calling us and saying, like, I can't answer yes to these questions anymore. My IT company is just not providing this technology or these services. The other thing they're asking for is, if you are doing services like training and vulnerability management and testing of firewalls, is it being done by a third party, not your IT company? Okay, so they're starting to no longer take the technical tests that your IT company may or may not be doing as evidence that it's actually being done. They're going to come to a third party like us and say, hey, provide documentation that this client is in fact doing this, right? Trust and verify concept. Yeah. The industry is changing quickly, because in 2021, the insurance industry for cyber was at like a 95% loss rate. So not a good number, right? No one wants to work off 5 or 6% margin. So look, cyber insurance is changing dramatically. And here's the next problem. If you get hit and file a claim, you're probably not going to be insurable in the future. It's like homeowners insurance. No one wants to file because may not be able to get insurance, or your homeowner's insurance will be 3 times the price. So we have to, once again, kind of a theme here, we have to think a little differently. It's not like, hey, I'm just going to file a claim and they're going to pay it and we'll be fine. You have an event and you can't get reinsured, and you have a second event. Where are you going to come up with that money? Hey, I get it. Right. Some people have a lot of money banked. Okay. And that is part of their risk decision, right? They're like, hey, I got enough money in the bank. If I get hit again, I'll just write a check. And others will say, I can't come up with $500,000 in cash in 3 days.
Right.
So it's all about understanding risk and making decisions, right? Everyone, for the most part is, not everyone. A lot of people are business owners, right? As well as an orthodontist. And these are decisions you get to make as a business owner. But I think the most important thing that you're doing is you're empowering them to make those decisions now. Like, hey, here's your risk. Can you afford $500,000 event? Can you afford reputational harm? What if all your patient records get published on the dark web? If you're fine with continuing on down the current path and feeling you're safe, then go for it. If you're not, then do something about it,
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, this has, just been an amazing episode. And you've given us so much to chew on here.
A lot.
So much. As we, kind of finish up and come to the end here, if you were to say, hey, if there's 3 things that you should do, what would you tell? What would you tell the audience? Like if you just have to, we all have to start somewhere. Maybe you're halfway through this process. Maybe you've never even thought about this before. What would be 3 things that you would say somebody listening should do if they're taking this seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing we spent a lot of time on, so it's worth talking about, in summary, which is training. If you're not training your staff, the risk is high, right? And then if you do get hit with ransomware and you will be investigated, they're going to ask you, show me the documentation on your training. You can pull that piece of paper out. That's a win with the auditors. Okay. So invest in some training for your team, and it reduces stress. Number 2, trust but verify, I should say. I think it's really important that, as great as your IT companies are, you seek out a third party, a cybersecurity company, right? Cybersecurity companies are specialists, just like orthodontists are. And they can tell you for a fact, hey, here's where you're doing really well from a security perspective. And here's where you have some holes, right? And here's how to fix those holes. Versus what most orthodontists are going through right now, which is, I'm being told I'm fine. Okay. So is that, if you're okay with being told you're fine and you're going to continue on with your day, I'm okay with that. Right. But I think as the owner of a practice, you need to have documentation as to whether or not that is actually true. So third-party assessments, really, really important. And then the last, from a technical perspective, is these tests on your firewalls and all of your computers to make sure that they're going to hold up to a cyber event, right? Mm-hmm. Just because your firewall is secure today doesn't mean in a week from now or a month from now it's going to be secure. Vulnerabilities, which basically means like something wrong with the device, pop up every single day, right? And if you're not testing your firewall every day to determine whether or not it's going to hold up, you're going to have a problem eventually. You're going to get hit, right? You know, even multiple government agencies says that almost every business will experience a cyber event over the next couple of years. You know, so those are the types of things you can seek out from cyber companies. But one of the biggest wins, I think, for businesses that they can do themselves, and even in their personal lives, is turn on multi-factor authentication, right? That's when you log into your bank and the bank sends you a text message with a code, or you log into your email and an app or text message shows up on your phone. Believe it or not, to protect those types of environments, MFA, multi-factor authentication, is almost always a win. Like very difficult, near impossible to defeat. Ortho practices have breaches of patient data through their email systems. So you remember how we started talking about think differently? Now think about your cloud didn't get hit. Your software didn't get hit at your office. Your computers didn't get hit. Someone in Russia logged into your Gmail account and it gained access to all these communications with your referrals. And now you technically have a breach too. Could it be prevented by turning a switch that costs you $0? Absolutely.
Yep. $0. But
$0.
But I just want to say $0, maybe a little bit more of your time, but $0, you know, and I think we're all in that move. But if it's something so simple, I mean, there's lots of other things we've been talking about, but that's so simple. It's just a few more seconds of waiting or putting in something else to really help a practice potentially. Well, Gary, this has been phenomenal. Every time we talk, I just get so much out of this. I could just sit here and, you know, like have my popcorn and be like, tell me more. Yes. So hopefully you'll be back on the show again and give us, you know, maybe this spring we can do another episode. But I know people want to know, okay, Gary's really given us some good information. How can they get a hold of you or Black Talon Security? Like if they're like, maybe I do want to just schedule a call or something to just find out where I'm at, you know, just do a risk assessment. Where and how would somebody get a hold of you? Sure.
You know, I think that's a great starting point. Like you said, they can reach us online at blacktalonsecurity.com. And my email address is gary@blacktalonsecurity.com. Happy to receive an email, you know, from you. And I think, Jill, you said it best, you know, at least explore it, right? And have a good understanding. Am I secure? Am I not secure? Right? We can't work off of feelings anymore, right? For events like this.
Absolutely.
That doesn't solve the problem. Facts do, right? And being a clinical, you know, person, decisions are made off of facts for the most part. The X-ray says this, I'm going to do this. You know, so same concept from the cyber world.
Yep. That's great. Well, Gary, thank you again so much for doing this podcast. I know that people are just going to be like, "Oh, that was a lot of meat and potatoes there. We didn't get barely any vegetables on that one," which is, you know,
a lot of shots going down the throats, right?
Exactly. So if you've listened to the podcast, you know I like to finish this up with a little speed round. We're going to lighten it up a bit. Are you ready for the speed round challenge?
Let's do it.
All right. My first question, coffee or tea?
Tea.
All right. Do you have a favorite book?
Do I have a favorite book? I don't actually. So I don't. Yeah, I'm not a big reader of books per se.
That's okay.
I'm typically reading like technical stuff, financial stuff, family stuff. So no perfect book.
Okay. Hey, that's all right. How about a favorite outdoor activity?
So I love to hike. My family and I are huge hikers. I have 2 little girls, and I would say a couple of weekends every month, especially in the fall and spring, we are out hiking somewhere new.
That is wonderful. You know me, I love being outdoors. Anything outdoors, I'm up for. So that's great. if this is a little bit of a heavier one, doesn't have to be super long, but if you could be remembered for one thing, what would it be?
I donate a lot of my time volunteering. I actually work up at West Point at the military academy, and I donate thousands of hours every year of my own time, often away from my family, to help future leaders of this country. So I want to be remembered as someone that gave back to our country and our community.
Oh, I love that. All right. And then the last question for you. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice. Well, I have a funny one. Have a good accountant and a good attorney. Someone told me that when I was 21, right? When I kind of was getting my business going. But from a life perspective, I think trust your instincts. It sounds kind of obvious, but I found when I didn't trust my instincts, especially with business decisions, I almost always regretted it. I've definitely had kind of that innate ability to quickly make decisions, based on gathering a lot of, information and then acting on it. And often it's instinctual, and I think people overprocess information also and then can't make decisions. So as a good leader, make a decision, right or wrong, make a decision. So that's great. Advice.
Well, I love it. Thank you so much for doing the speed round. And again, just thank you for being on Hey Docs. This was a amazing episode. I know that lots of people scribbled a lot of notes, and I'm sure there's going to be people reaching out saying, all right, let's talk just a little bit about this scary thing called cybersecurity. So, so again, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It was an honor. It's always great chatting with you.
All right. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to Hey Docs podcast with your host, Jill Allen. Be sure to subscribe, like, and review on any of your favorite listening platforms. Or if you want to catch our video live, jump on over to our YouTube channel. See you next week. Gary is the CEO and co-founder of Black Talon Security. Gary and his team at Black Talon Security are dedicated to data security and understanding the latest trends in the industry, particularly as they relate to the dental industry. Gary has decades of experience in software development and computer IT, and developed one of the very first cloud-based healthcare systems. He is also a sought-after speaker and writer who lectures nationally on cybersecurity threats and their impact on the healthcare industry, and is also a member of InfraGard. Black Talon has been called in to assist with some of the largest distributed ransomware attacks in the U.S. history, which resulted in millions of dollars of ransom payments and tens of millions of dollars in damages to victims. In every instance, all data was recovered and successfully decrypted. Black Talon is also an expert in preventative measures as well as incident response.